The night it happened began with a single breath held too long, the kind that tightens the chest when instinct screams that something is wrong, and in that instant a quiet corner of a crowded city turned into a crossroads between fear and fate as 18-year-old Emily Carter stood frozen beside a flickering bus shelter, her phone dead, her ride gone, and the shadow of danger stretching closer with every passing second while the low rumble of motorcycles rolled through the air like distant thunder. Before the story pulls you deeper, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and unexpected heroes, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because stories like this connect hearts across the world, and Emily had no idea that somewhere behind her fear, the world was about to show her that strangers can become family when it matters most. As she had just finished a late shift at a diner where she worked to help her mother pay bills after her father passed away, exhaustion clinging to her like a second skin while the city felt unusually cold and indifferent, the streetlights buzzing overhead, the bus schedule slipping past midnight, and the feeling of being watched creeping in slowly until it was impossible to ignore, because a man lingered too close for comfort, his presence heavy and wrong, his steps matching hers when she tried to move away, her heart pounding as memories of news headlines and warnings flooded her mind, leaving her torn between running and freezing, when suddenly the roar of motorcycles grew louder and a group of riders pulled into the gas station across the street, leather jackets catching the light, skull patches unmistakable, the Hells Angels name stitched boldly across their backs, a sight that might have terrified her on any other night. But something in the way one of them noticed her panic changed everything, as the tallest rider, a broad-shouldered man with silver threaded through his beard and eyes that carried both storms and calm, watched the scene unfold with the awareness of someone who had seen too much of the world to ignore a silent cry for help, and as Emily's hands trembled and her breath turned shallow, he moved with deliberate calm, stepping between her and the threat without drama, leaning in just enough that his presence felt protective rather than imposing, his words low and steady, instructing her through tone and posture to pretend he was her father, to stand close, to breathe, to trust, and in that moment Emily felt something unexpected, a strange safety wrapping around her fear as she placed herself beside him, his arm resting lightly around her shoulders in a way that felt practiced and respectful, like a promise without words, while the man who had been stalking her hesitated, confused by the sudden shift, the illusion of family disrupting his intentions, and with one last uncertain glance he melted back into the shadows, leaving behind the echo of what could have been, as the biker, whose name was Jack Sullivan, didn't celebrate or boast or even ask questions, he simply stayed there, grounded and solid, until Emily's shaking slowed and her color returned, and only then did the reality of who he was and what he had done begin to sink in, because Jack wasn't just a biker with a fearsome reputation, he was a father who had lost a daughter years ago, a man who carried regret like a scar beneath his leather vest, someone who had learned the hard way that strength meant protection, not intimidation, and as the other riders quietly formed a respectful distance, giving space rather than crowding, Emily realized that these men were not the monsters she had been taught to fear but human beings bound by loyalty and a code she had never understood until now. The code that said you don't turn away when someone is in danger, you step up, you become the shield, and the night continued with Jack making sure Emily had a safe ride home, calling a cab, waiting until she was inside, refusing thanks with a simple nod as if this was nothing more than what any decent person should do, yet for Emily it was everything, because that night rewrote her understanding of courage and compassion, and in the days that followed she found herself replaying the moment again and again, the steady presence, the silent reassurance, the way fear had loosened its grip the instant someone chose to care, while Jack rode away carrying his own quiet thoughts, reminded that saving someone else had healed a small piece of himself, and weeks later fate crossed their paths again when Emily spotted the same group of riders at the diner, her heart racing with recognition as she served their table with a confidence she hadn't felt before, and Jack recognized her too, not with grand gestures or dramatic acknowledgments but with a soft smile and a respectful nod that said he remembered and that it mattered. And as the town slowly learned the story through whispers and shared moments, perceptions began to shift, people seeing beyond patches and engines to the choices that define a person, and Emily found her voice growing stronger, her fear replaced by a sense of purpose as she began volunteering with a local safety program, inspired by the idea that anyone could be a protector if they chose to be, while Jack continued his rides, now with a renewed sense that redemption doesn't come from erasing the past but from showing up in the present, and on the anniversary of that night, Emily wrote a letter she never sent, thanking the man who had stood between her and the dark, who had reminded her that family can be borrowed in moments of need, and that heroes don't always look the way we expect. And as this story draws closer to its end, remember that if it touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can appear in the unlikeliest forms, please like, share, and engage with this video, because your support helps these stories reach others who might need hope. And just before the ending, take a moment to comment and tell us whether you believe that one small act can change a life forever, because somewhere tonight, someone is standing in the cold, afraid, waiting for proof that the world still has good in it, and this story stands as that proof, that a whispered warning, a borrowed role, and a brave choice can shock not just a moment but an entire life into a better direction, leaving us all a little more willing to step forward when it matters most. Months after that night, the ripple it created continued to move quietly through lives that had once felt separate, and Emily Carter discovered that fear does not always leave all at once but returns in echoes that test whether courage has truly taken root, because even though she smiled more, walked with her head higher, and felt safer knowing the world held unexpected protectors, there were nights when the memory of being watched crept back into her chest like cold air, especially when work ran late or the city felt too empty, and during those moments she remembered the weight of Jack Sullivan's presence beside her, not as a biker or a symbol but as a human being who had chosen responsibility over indifference, and that memory became a quiet anchor that helped her breathe through the past, while Jack himself found that the act he had dismissed as nothing more than instinct had followed him home in ways he had not anticipated, stirring emotions he had long buried beneath miles of road and years of loss, because his daughter's face appeared in his thoughts more often now, not as a wound but as a reminder of what it meant to be there when someone needed protection. And within his club, a subtle shift took place as well, with writers sharing the story not as a boast but as a reminder of the code they lived by, reinforcing among themselves that strength was measured not by fear inspired but by fear prevented. And as weeks turned into a season, Emily's volunteer work grew into something larger than she had imagined, speaking to young women about awareness and self-trust, not from a place of victimhood but from empowerment, explaining how one person's decision can interrupt danger and how asking for help is not weakness. And although she never used Jack's name publicly, the essence of his choice lived in every word she shared, while the town itself began to soften around the edges, neighbors watching out for one another, small acts of kindness stacking quietly like bricks in a wall of shared humanity. And fate tested these lessons one more time on a storm-heavy evening when an accident on the highway sent chaos rippling through the streets, sirens echoing, rain blurring vision, and panic rising as a bus skidded and passengers scattered in confusion. And once again motorcycles appeared through the downpour, headlights cutting through darkness, riders dismounting not as a spectacle but as helpers, directing traffic, shielding strangers from harm. And Emily, caught nearby, watched from under an awning as Jack moved with calm authority, coordinating aid until emergency services arrived. And in that moment she understood something profound, that heroes are not defined by single moments but by consistency, by showing up again and again when the world tilts toward disorder. And later that night, as the rain eased and calm returned, Emily walked home feeling a sense of peace she had never known before, aware that danger would always exist but so would choice, and that she too now carried the responsibility to be someone who steps forward rather than away. While Jack rode off into the night with his club, the road stretching endlessly ahead, his heart lighter than it had been in years, knowing that one whisper of protection had grown into a legacy of courage that extended far beyond that bus shelter. And as this story approaches its final breath, if it has touched your heart, reminded you that compassion can come from the most unexpected places, and shown you that one decision can change countless futures, please take a moment now to like, share, and engage with this video so this message of humanity can reach others who may need it. And before the ending, leave a comment telling us whether you believe kindness is a choice anyone can make no matter who they are or where they come from, because somewhere out there another Emily is waiting, another Jack is passing by, and the next whisper of protection could be yours to give, leaving behind proof that even in a world filled with noise and fear, a single act of courage can still shock, heal, and inspire far beyond the night it begins.